we've got some pretty heavy hitters in the room today, coming from all different walks of queer publishing and writing. So I hope you guys are excited about the conversation we're going to have. I have some hopefully interesting questions that aren't typical. They probably may have a little bit of in-depthness that I really want to tap into. But to start off, I wanted to ask you folks, introducing your mark in the industry, what did you feel like? Were you able to appear fully as yourselves from the jump? Were there any interactions with your intersections that provided any hesitation to do so? And this is open-ended, so anyone can answer.
I don't really see our cameras. I'll just jump in. I came out in my school newspaper at the age of 16. I'm 46 years old right now. And when they talk about coming out as a process, it didn't dawn on me until now that part of my coming out process as a teenager in the 90s was through writing, and how that would be a theme in my creative life, that it would be about vulnerability, it would be about expose, it would be about confession, it would be about bearing truth, it would be about having a calling with these social issues. You know, we are not in culture war 1, we are in culture war 4, or maybe 5 or 6. We're gonna be honest about it. So that was definitely one era of that. But also like coming out as a process, because there were other moments in my life that kind of recloseted parts of myself, even though I did that one act then, and then followed through with it. You know, I lived my life that way, and then kind of like I got a little less bold, and I let people suppress certain elements of myself. So that's one for me. That's the biggest one, and also the one that signified to me that in order to be at my best, I had to have the same spirit. And I think bravery, if I can give myself the credit, the 16-year-old had. I haven't always been that person from that point on to now, but recuperating that is a big part of my journey.
Thank you for sharing that. Miguel, Mary Frances, do you have any additions?
Yeah, actually, that really resonates about sort of deploying or protecting your energy in the coming out process, and the self-actualization process. You know, it's internal, but also you're experiencing the world's experiencing you. It's funny. I've been out my whole career, and you know, I think there was a moment early on. I worked at Bon Appetit from like 2011 to 2013, and that was right when there was the magazine moved to New York City, and Adam Rappaport took over as editor, and we all know how that ended. But in the early phase, I think everyone was kind of trying to find their way, and you know, I was just trying to focus on cooking and testing recipes and learning as much as I could. And I remember there was an opportunity to do like this. They came out with a cookware line, and it was on QVC, and somebody was going to have to be on these like B-roll videos cooking. This was in the early days of video too, right? And they brought in a makeup artist and asked me if they could put on a sleeve of tattoos onto my arm for when I was cooking, so that I think there was an idea of like the right kind of way to be gay or a lesbian publicly, and a way that you should look if that's the case. And I remember they it was actually a really weird situation, but they did end up putting something on my arm. It looked so bad that I just like washed it off, and I was like, this is really, really dumb. I don't have tattoos on my arms. And so it was one of those moments where it was like, sorry, I'm rambling, but it was a sort of like moment of being the right kind of gay for to be accepted. And this was, you know, more than a decade ago. And I think today, something I appreciate so much, and I see embodied in food media, is just like all kinds of gay, you know, every kind of gay. And there is no one, you know, that idea of intersectionality was so not part of the conversation a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree with you there, Mary Frances. I think for me, in terms of, I have a little bit of a different journey than the rest of the group here. I came into writing late into life, but I came into restaurants a lot earlier. So I feel like that very intimate interaction where you had with tables, where you kind of had to suss out whether or not that mattered to them, was a big one. Because for me, whenever I would be at a table, it was either a selling point or it was the thing that would make sure that I wouldn't get any tips that day. And so for me, and especially through writing, clearly those two things are indelible, right? Like for the Beard Foundation Media Award, for the essay that I wrote, it's absolutely clear that that has to be part of my vision in terms of food and wine, is that I am this kind of person, I am this kind of story, layered on top of all these things that we've been talking about in terms of intersectionality, right? I'm an immigrant story, I'm a Filipino story, I'm a queer story, I'm a New York story. Even, I hate to say it now, it's harder for me to come out as a New Yorker rather than as a gay person, because I think the chip on my shoulder is so much bigger for, oh, I didn't grow up here, but I've been here 20 years. So it's now kind of about the time when I've just started to get comfortable with myself, but I've been comfortable with myself for forever. And it's just now that like all these other kind of outside pressures and labels seem to have just caught up. So I think that's my biggest thing, is that in terms of intersectionality, in terms of identity seeking, the world just needs to be ready for me. It needed to learn how to wait. I've been here the whole time.
So it sounds like to me, that there were obstacles contributed to queerness, but that wasn't like the end all be all, because all of us have a lot of many other intersections involved. But do you think that really matters at the end of the day? Like, does it influence your thought process, your writing process, your interactions with folks in your business?
I'll take this one for a little bit. Again, I'm a little bit different than a lot of the kind of like the very systematic kind of like magazine editor kind of publisher relationships. I deal a lot with winemakers on a very specific basis, mostly because I need to taste their wine and then talk about it in an audience specific way. And so for me, a little bit of that, coming out isn't a one-time thing. This is like a continuous process that we always have to kind of negotiate in the spaces that we inhabit. And whether or not, if I'm hearing a winemaker, for example, continue to use gendered language in their process of kind of talking about tasting, for example, I have to take a pause and kind of give them that like educative stance to be like, it's not just me here. There's a whole group of people who would probably not, I wouldn't say offended, but just like are just way more conscious about what it is that you're trying to convey. And there's better language for that. We already know that there's better language for that. We've proven it time and time again. We can be poetic, we can be romantic, we can be more empathetic, but at the end of the day, it comes back to the quality that how human can we make this, and how empathetic can I make this work so that it is in service for either an audience, an industry, or a community that like needs to hear that. So wholly, I think my vision of I guess like stepping queer into this area is just being as honest as I can be, and kind of finding ways in which I can advocate or be, I'd very happily be a chaotic accomplice for as many people as possible if it meant that the disruption was enough for people to maybe stop and think about what it is that they think is still normal, as opposed to just human. Being human's weird. Hello.
Vanessa, can you restate your initial question?
Yeah, for sure. My initial question was talking about obstacles in your writing, or just in engagement in general, and if you think that intersectional queerness actually matters when you're having these engagements and thought.
I think it does matter. It's sort of if you're having that human conversation that Miguel references, like you're part of the story, even if you try to sort of be a wallflower and just absorb what's going on around you in your reporting. You know, whoever your subject is or whatever you're reporting on can't help but experience you and sort of filter their responses towards you and whatever their, openness or prejudices might be. But I've also found that in the recent past, probably in the last 5 years for me personally, that being a queer person in an editorial role has probably opened me up to the opportunity to tell a lot of stories that either folks wouldn't have been comfortable participating in the story if the writer or the coordinator or editor had been maybe like a cis white male, or not to say that that person couldn't have had a great story, but I think there's a level of comfort when there's an understanding of identity, the shared identity, or maybe just marginalized identity that is sort of like, okay, hey, I think you're going to help tell my story well, or get it right. And that is something, that perspective, I think, is incredibly valuable, and we're just starting to see the fruits of that in the awards that are being, the awards that have been given out over the last couple of years, I think acknowledge that level of work and the level of insight that's possible when you don't have, a majority population member doing the primary reporting on something.
And, to answer your question from my part, I think it does from a writing perspective. I mean, I just finished Kosher Soul, which won the National Jewish Book Award. I believe I'm like I don't know, like the first Black person to do that. And I was very cautious about what I wrote because you look at the cover, there's the black, red, and green challah, the blue and white challah. There's the original pride flag challah. And then there's a mixture of all of those, and those chalot represents my identity. And at the same time, I could not bring myself. I got to the chapter called Keshet, and it ended up being a chapter of like a couple of paragraphs as opposed to this full-on, like, go for it, talk about the intersection of Blackness, queerness, and Jewishness. And so I kind of left it at very tame things. And originally, I had COVID to write through, so I was going to be bold. I had riots and rebellion and revolutions to write through. I was going to be bold. I was going to tell all the tea. I was going to tell everything and get in everybody's face. I was going to be woke AF, and it was going to be on. And then when I got to that page, and it was all about hooking up and finding my way to a husband and what my relationship is like now, et cetera, I couldn't do it. I could not. I still feel like we have a long way to go in terms of queer women, trans folks, queer men, and everybody in between, bi folks, everybody, pan folks, in terms of that familiarity factor that Mary Frances was talking about. I think that, I often joke with my husband. I said, when people ask us, how did you meet? The real answer is we hooked up on an app. But the answer everybody wants and they don't get is, oh, we were having some lovely experience with some florists. I'm so tired of every gay woman meets at Home Depot and every gay man meets at the florist or something, or Drag Race showing at the bar. I mean, it does. No, we meet on computers and apps these days. And if we're really lucky, we get to have those organic meetings. But it goes beyond just how do you meet your significant others and other significance. It's, how do you explain the polyamorous or polyandrous relationship in a lot of queer lives? How do you explain that, yeah, that person's your friend, but you have a history, but How do you explain, if you're a queer person who's had children? What does that mean? I thought you were, people lose their minds. And so for me, like, I thought I was bold. I thought I had written a lot of things that were very vulnerable and a lot of, things that were very in your face. But I don't think it's on my next project. It's a part of a trilogy. Kosher Soul is the middle of Cooking Gene, Kosher Soul, and of course, whatever this next project will be called. I assure you it won't be called Eggplants and Peaches. But it's, all about like, queerness in the kitchen. And maybe then by the time I get to that finished project, I'll be ready to bear all. But for now, I think we still have a society where we have to educate heterosexual, heteronormative people about what it really means to be a queer person. Regardless of what we practice certain things or don't, that comfort level has to be there, not for our sake, but just for the sake of those who are coming after us and those who are trying to reveal their truth right now.
I love this tie-in that you all have, which to me sounds like advocacy just living and breathing. And I think a lot of people expect big advocacy groups and conversations and just, talking all the time about what's wrong with the world, which is obviously great. But I also feel like just our existences and spaces, that is a very big part of advocacy, especially when you're talking about media, especially when you're talking about bearing your soul out to, do the work you do. So when you think of the specific medium that food media is a very specific medium in general. Do you think that, where does that energy for yourself, being that inadvertent or advertent advocate, comes from? I'll repeat again, just because I said a lot. So since food media is a very specific medium, where do you think that energy for yourself to be a part of it comes from?
I love food. I mean, that's where it comes from. I am also queer. They're very related and very unrelated things about me. I have been obsessed with food and cooking since I was a small child. And it is the passion that has like been the most consistent my entire life. I think where my like willingness to be a public facing queer person through the last 15 years of my career, that energy has come from a variety of different places. So I don't know if you're asking more about like the food media or the queer part of being a public facing, content creator.
I think just because, like you were saying, like there is the intersection of queerness, but that just being queer, that's kind of the end of it. Like I always, like, we talk about like queer food, and people ask us like at the foundation, like, what is queer food? I'm like, meat. I make food. It's officially not queer food, so that's the end of it, so just kind of more on the writing side of utilizing just yourself within that medium of you loving food, and how that's expressed for you as a person.
I think that, so we did a queer food package. That's not what it was actually called, but at Food and Wine a few years ago for Pride Month. And it actually, we had prepped it in like April and May of 2020 when everybody was home, beginning of the pandemic. And then in June of 2020, there were way more important conversations happening than what is queer food. So we held it. We didn't release it until I think like maybe June 29th at the very end of the month, because it was like, actually, this is part of this is part of all the conversations that's happening, but we needed to like leave space for other conversations in the Black Lives Matter movement. And it ultimately was one of those things where we were like glad that we shared it at the end of Pride Month, but still just shining light on that intersectionality. And there was we did a bunch of stories sort of trying to answer the question of what is queer food, which is one of those things it's nice to talk about because you can come up with lots of answers. And at the end of it, the resounding theme that most people landed on was community, gathering. It is a source of comfort and a source of nourishment with your people. And as someone who grew up Catholic and very much in a religious family and a religious community setting, that really, really, really resonated, because if you grow up in a parish or in a, you know, you have a church home, it's something that you miss when you no longer do. And so to have food and have that gathering with others, other like-minded people, be they very different from one another, but still have a connecting thread, food becomes a really powerful conduit.
We used to have with anti-Thanksgiving. You know, when we were all sort of like still within the networks of our families, and it's because Thanksgiving was so difficult. And so we would have anti-Thanksgiving, and the rule was that everybody had to bring something that was not traditionally Thanksgiving food because we were tired of it, and had to be a different color of the pride flag. And by that point, I think we were into the pride flag and the trans flag, not the Philadelphia flag, but we're almost there. So we had all those colors somehow, some way. Someone is inevitably going to bring Jell-O because there was no, you know, how else you can get violet and, you know, blue and white and pink and all that nonsense. And that wasn't so easy. Jell-O or yogurt or something, you know, that nature. I'm gonna I'm gonna co-sign with what Mary Frances said about community. That's the biggest thing. When I've asked people about what does queerness and food mean to you, those words, community, communalizing, bringing people together. It's the brunches, it's the cookouts, it's the barbecues, it's the fact that we have, you know, we come from these traditions, Filipino, Catholic, Jewish, Black, beyond, that are really, that value the family celebration. And a lot of if we're lucky, we can have both. You know, we can have Passover Seder, and we can have, you know, a spirited mahjong game with noshes, because if it doesn't have noshes, it's a glacier party. So, I mean, all those things put together. And, you know, the cookout is real when it comes to, you know, us as Black folks. So all those things are really important, and they get incorporated. You know, it was fascinating. Every year during DC Black Pride, there was always the family cookout, which was actually for several thousand people, you know. But beyond that, I think food is also, I can't speak for everybody. I'm only speaking for what I know, so please forgive me. But it's for a lot of Black, brown, indigenous, queer boys, the kitchen with grandma and the aunties and the mamas is a haven from a very scary world where a lot of homophobic things get said, a lot of queerphobic things get said and done to you. And so you feel safer in this space where you inevitably pick up mannerisms and also give mannerisms away. The older you got, it was a two-way street. But beyond that, I think it's also about gestures. I mean, we live in a society where I think a lot of heteronormative people take for granted the fact that every damn year in elementary school, we got pushed on us those stupid chalky hearts to give to each other, but especially opposite sex. You know, you were raised on a whole cerebral diet of oysters and chocolate or aphrodisiacs. For who? For what? And then when you know, I think it's obvious that we have so many great gay women, so many great gay men who work within the fields of food, and those tricky bisexuals with their fantastic talents to woo all of us. You know, I mean, we do come from a world where aesthetics, parties, we're party people. We're party people. We love to celebrate whenever we can celebrate, because life is often not a celebration for us. We do the best we can to show love, share love, and part of that's through our food. And we get shady and picky and snappy with the food. I've seen all the members of the whole alphabet do this. Doesn't matter who you are. I've seen it. Who made that potato salad? There's nothing funnier than watching 8 Black lesbians argue over who made the potato salad, as if, you know. So that's for me. That's the casual part of the answer that I'd like to give. I'd love to hear what Miguel has to say. I love how we're all like taking turns like in an interesting kind of way. So yeah, that's cool.
I love that we kind of, I mean, it's the queer thing about, you know, I love the conversation that queer folks have where it's like 7 topics all at once, but also like 9 things in your head and you're trying to hold all of them with equal preciousness. Firstly, to go off of what Michael was saying, so culturally in Filipino, one of the ways that we ask each other if you're okay is if you've eaten yet, right? And I think one of the other things that's really clear for me about how people ask you about how you've been cared for is that you look healthy. Have you eaten? And so to me, one of the biggest things about queerness and food, or however we want to define this story, is that I think part of the reason why we go to food so much is that at its core, it's survival, right? We need to be able to find a way that like, this is the thing that makes me feel safe because I know that I'm going to survive. And I think that's why our parents, the people who love us the most, taught us how to cook. And it's because you're going to be okay when this happens to you. Let me give you this gift. And then not just that, but like you get to share it with people. I think one of the most important things that we find, especially as a queer community, and I get so emotional about this, is that we get to choose the people that we get to share our food with. And that is so important. It is such a big, meaningful thing to me eating is such a vulnerable act, no? And it is one of those things where it's like, I'm going to be at my most vulnerable when I'm at my hungriest, where I'm at my thirstiest, when I'm at when I need to satiate like the social capital for me, because I don't know how to interact in this world that like is actively trying to kill me and suppress me and not understand who I am. And so here is a group of people who have shown unconditional love. And here I am trying to show them that like, this is what my unconditional love can look like. It's also delicious. This is like, that's also a part of who I am. And then in the wine world where there's already kind of like fraught ideas of hierarchy and clearly like the space that we inhabit where, you know, like we're still kind of like going through like second wave feminism in wine, it feels like, where the big thing is, you know, when we share a bottle, like the inherentness of a bottle is to share it, right? The inherence of kind of sharing glasses is so that we find this common experience. And to me, that there's nothing gayer than that, you know. The things that come out when alcohol is involved, I mean, clearly it's always a kiki, but the funnier thing is that, you know, the way that we look at these things and the way that we talk about, say, like even biodiversity in a vineyard or even just like grape variety diversity in a region, it's just like you look at the same kind of spectrum of people that are around you, and it's the same story. There's a lot of queerness happening around us, whether or not it's coded in a way that is accessible to, you know, this kind of like heteronormative set. But at the same time, you know, thank my therapist for this. Like maybe I can't care about that because I have a group of people who I do care about, that I'd rather see that kind of growth and passion injected into a group of people that's also going to give it back unconditionally. And I think that's the biggest thing about queerness, is that it's unconditional. None of us chose to be this way. But the fact that we do get to choose everything else that comes afterwards is so powerful to me. And that is, I think, the biggest thing that I can preach about being queer, is that, you know, our chosen families are like so important to us. And in the same way that the habits that we inherit from all of these other kind of this like queer love that we get, I think that's the biggest thing that we can share with each other. That's why community is so important. That's why sharing is so important. That's why when we get nourished by this kind of food, it also fills your cup very, very much.
I think it's funny, Michael, that you mentioned about potato salad, because I was literally at dinner the other day, like yesterday, and they had potato salad as a side, and we were all like, no, we're not even trying it. It's not happening. I don't even want to like chance it. Like, we don't know whose potato salad that is. There could be apples in it, and then we're gonna have a whole riot. So I just thought it was funny because yes, that is a very real thing. And even to your point, Miguel, like people always ask me, I lived in LA for 8 years, and people are always like, where are the lesbians at? I'm like, at home. We're at home, we're eating. Our community is, we don't go out, you know, that's just a thing that we do. So it's very hard to find where the lesbians are because we're not out, you know. So I just thought it was very interesting because we do have that community, and then we're stuck together. We want to celebrate together. We want to fellowship together around food. So I thought that was really funny that you mentioned that, because it is totally a real thing of like inviting people over and then never leaving. So um, pivoting, like all of you guys have won JBF awards. I mean, Michael, you said yourself, you were the first, potentially the first Black person to win the National Jewish Book Award, and you are the first Black person to win a JBF award in cookbook writing. So when we're talking about these revolutionary spaces of being the first, in a lot of spaces in just your careers and just your lives, what do you think holds these major folks back from pushing even bigger opportunities? I mean, you guys have had really big opportunities, but there's obviously more elevation, more people looking for you guys to exist. So what do you think the big picture of companies do to like hold you guys back from being able to reach full potentials that are necessary to build community?
I'm gonna be real with you. This is where our conversation is not going to turn left, but it's going to go down a side road to pee, as we say in the South. So I think one thing is that I've had to think about this. There are other parts of my identity. I'm a fat Black man. I am a bear. I'm a chub bear. Yes, that's all. That's the Bob. And one of the things I distinctly remember when I went up for that second medal that night was before I gave Tamron Hall back that microphone. I looked at my medal and I said, nope, I got to say this. I looked right into that big bright light, into that microphone, and I said, and thank you, James Beard, for teaching us that a fat gay man can be a powerful thing. You know, I feel it. I feel the fat phobia. I feel the gay in public light. It's like the story that Mary Frances told about the tattoo sleeve. It's like, until you look like this brand, you're not our version of what queer should be or gay should be. We all know that there are, I'm not going to name any name because it's not my business, but there are plenty of celebrities and public figures out there that we know a lot of what goes into them being a public figure is the fact that some gatekeeper thinks that they're more marketable. You know, I already understood, what my limitations were. And I remember it was very powerful because I remember going into the award ceremony with my full kente cloth, dashiki, pride ring. I brought out the pride triangles from back in the day. I had a kippah on. I had my sacred necklaces from Africa. I mean, I had all parts of me. I was a warrior princess walking up into that space. And I was scared I wasn't going to win because I thought, God, if I got this far and I don't take anything away from it, what was I here for? A defeat. I have a lot of people I let down. And that was a big part of my journey, was saying the words, I'm here, I'm all these things. And of course, there were Black people who were like, I don't get it. I don't know. The American fools that I can tell you a million stories about that. But the good things did happen. But then I was coming back on the train that night. I had to go all the way from New York to do a gig in Williamsburg, Virginia, to go back and do my other part of my life. And I remember I got up, I was so excited, I was so thrilled. I was just thanking God. I had this, my ancestors, everything. And back then I belonged to like a gay bear cooking thing on Facebook. And I said my business. And you know what? That's when I noticed that things had not changed that much. Because on the one hand, I had a handful of gay people of color, gay bears saying, oh my God, this is so awesome. This is like great. I'm in tears. I'm excited. But then I had a plurality of white males on that same chat, whatever group that was, basically saying, who cares? What are you doing? Look at you, saying nasty things like, whatever. And I'm like, I thought this was about, us doing things, not if you Black. And then when I talked about affirming the fact that I'm a man of size, well, we shouldn't be celebrating that. And I'm just like, here's my Black fat ass, and it's Jewish too. So enjoy this, with a napkin, and make sure your doily is on and your hands are washed. Because I'm just like, this is part of the problem. And this is why certain people market certain things to certain people, because I think that they know that those issues exist. And instead of putting people out there as they are, you know, I think we all know this. I think we all know that, you know, one of the groups in the queer community that is the most suppressed are people who are overweight and beyond. Now, for some of us, that's not the same issue. But if you add color onto that, or ethnicity or religion, other issues, it gets deeper fast. And so I think we have a lot of work to do there, but also in reminding people, as Mary Frances said, don't put that sleeve don't belong to me. That's not who I am. This is my brand of who I am. It should be respected.
Especially to go off of that, it's the cult of no femmes, no fats, no Asians on those apps now. And then the other kind of like scarier thing about that is that it's insidious. Is that the wider heteronormative culture understands that, because it's adjacent to whiteness, it's adjacent to supremacy, it's adjacent to power. They can cultivate power without ever having to come out. And then which is a very different thing, especially if you're brown, Black, Indigenous. There's already a chip on your shoulder where like, I can't turn this off. People say, you know, leave your baggage at the door. Babe, my baggage is here. It's right here. I can't turn this off. And so, you know, why would I? On the same token, it's that idea that, you know, just like you were saying, this is not the audience that I'm catering to. It's not my priority. But again, priority isn't excluding anybody, right? Like all I'm saying is, this is a group of folks that need to understand why my existence is resistance and why this is important. And so these are the things that like really matter in terms of queerness, is that as many intersections as we want to say that we have, look, I really want to celebrate the fact that Michael is a fat, gay, Jewish, Black man. And that's his audience, that's his story. I can't tell that. How can I? There is no way. But then again, like also, I know my superpower is that, well, I'm a Filipino immigrant, queer, like, unfortunately, a person in wine. And so it's like, that's a story that somebody wants to hear or needs to hear. If it means that your path gets easier, fucking great, let's do that. And all it is just understanding that my priority doesn't mean that I'm excluding you. However, your existence almost always exclude ours. And so that's the biggest power differential, is that, you know, I'm willing to call that out if it means that that's going to happen less and less and less.
My friends, if you want to add, please do.
So yeah, sorry, as a writer, I was writing my notes to not forget what to say. I think yes to all of this, because it has to do with the sort of like identity, but also like hard to pin down nuances that about decision making, and sort of that like that veil, the opaque thing that you can't see through. You don't know why a decision was made, but you have a pretty good hunch. I think I want to like bring to light, you're asking about like what companies can do, or who people want to support people going up to the next level, right? It's about money. Okay. Money's a tool. Don't get me wrong. This is not about being like classist or something, but money is a tool, and it helps open up access and give people opportunity. So, you know, I think that there's something, I call it the gay tax. And it's about existing in the world and having to spend more money because you're gay on certain things. There's also a motherhood tax, a woman's tax, a minority tax, you name it. There are different reasons why people are put in a socioeconomically disadvantaged position. And it could just be little things too. You know, I think I've ended up sort of in a corporate track. I freelanced for several years. I cooked in restaurants, but I've been sort of more working for these bigger media companies for the most part. And before my wife and I were married, she was on my health insurance for a while, and I had to pay tax on the imputed income of her benefit of health insurance, because we were partnered. We've been partnered for 5 or 6 years, and we weren't married officially, but there wasn't gay marriage. So she could be my, I don't know, common law spouse or domestic partner, whatever you want to call it. But I had to pay tax on that health insurance because it was like some benefit that wasn't really mine to take or to give to her. I will say, like, the compounded lifetime tax of being a female couple, because men as a rule in society make more money, and gay men, particularly cis white gay men, but also just gay men in general, have the opportunity to make more money throughout their lifetime. So when you partner that and you have two men in a relationship, they actually have a greater chance of making a lot more money than some straight couples, and definitely than female couples. That's not true for everyone, but there's that potential opportunity in terms of statistics. My wife and I just welcomed our first child in November. We have a little baby girl, and we live in the mediocre state of Alabama. Currently, my amazing job at Food and Wine brought us down here. But here we are, and I am listed as the father on her birth certificate, and I have to adopt her officially as a step parent because I did not give birth to her. And Alabama is what's considered an unfriendly state and has a number of laws that are sort of set up like dominoes. So the moment gay marriage potentially could fall through the Supreme Court or federal regulation goes away, our marriage will be null and void, and I won't be my child's parent anymore. So I'm paying a lawyer and all these court fees so I can adopt my own child. This is after we had to obviously go through fertility treatments to end up with a child. So I just want to, I'm naming all of these things and pointing them out because the lifetime value of being gay puts you at such a disadvantage to get ahead, even with education, even with access to opportunity, even with awards, even with, being in the high level of a certain industry. You can get to that point, but you're constantly being cut down and constantly being charged money for things to just live. And it bears on a person, not just financially.
I kind of have to respond because everything you said, like folks out there, don't get it twisted. Until we solve the parallel and greater issue of misogyny in this culture and just the mistreatment of women and the debasement of queer women and just period. And then let's even talk about, I thought about this recently in terms of all these bans and things and hoping that there's only so much effect on the food world because, I think the world is, I hate to say this, but I think the world is much more comfortable with ne'er-do-well, gay men of color and trans women on the corner than is trans women on hit shows and becoming directors and producers and authors and trans men doing things that they want to do and gay women doing things they want to do. I mean, it's like what the world is asking us, where are your chains? Where are your chains? And if your chains aren't on, what are the chains can we put on you to curtail and limit you? And it's so important for us to support each other and get that word out and say, remind people, everything ain't fine and dandy. Because you see somebody on TV don't mean they're rich. Because you see somebody on the computer don't mean they got everything together. Because X, Y, and Z is going on and good for them. Don't forget, we're also the ones who support our families. It's across the board. We're also the ones who are like, for the same point, people telling us like, oh, you're anti-family values. Who are the ones who pick up the slack? Send money home to the parents. Go take home the elderly parents, the auntie and uncle. Make sure that godchild gets through school. Who's the one making sure that the family history is maintained? And all those other little pieces. And who is also paying those intersectional taxes? I certainly pay it all the time, different things. I'm fortunate I don't have to pay some, but unfortunately to pay others. I mean, it works stuff out, but I just wanted to respond to that and just say amen corner to everything y'all have said. I'm even more inspired now than I was when I sat down at the table, because this is really what I needed to hear.
You're getting at something too, though. It's sort of this unpaid labor that you're doing because maybe, I don't know whether or not you have children or, would consider yourself to have a family, but like if you don't have for queer people, I think a lot of people aren't parents, and I'm a new parent, so this is like all new to me, but to be put kind of in that role of like, oh, well, you don't have those responsibilities, those heteronormative responsibilities of child rearing or family management. Can you take on all this? And yes, it's part of being a community, part of being a family, part of all that. But there is this unequal distribution of things. Just to look at it sort of on the other side, you're doing these things, you're holding it up, you're holding the family together, but that's also ultimately sort of a form of unpaid labor that is another load on the queer community that I think
it's clearly way more emotional too. You're right in that, Mary Frances, that like, yes, it's unpaid labor, but like emotional labor is just as taxing, if not even more so, right? Like
unpaid in whatever sense.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But like it's already enough to kind of say that, I need to be empathetic, like especially coming from like the restaurant world. It's like, well, how can I be empathetic with you if you're antipathetic to what it is that I'm trying to do or provide or even give as a service, whether or not that's food or writing or hospitality. I think like, no, the fact that we are saying something, and to put it bluntly, right? Like, yes, we have awards, but I got paid once for what I wrote. And at the same time, it's like, how many more times can I capitalize on the fact that an establishment who has completely almost disregarded my entire existence for a long time, and then up until a certain point was like, we need to start thinking about this, and like, thank you for doing that. I still am on the point of like, well, how can I capitalize on that opportunity? How can I make sure that expectation of a society basically saying, you're worth this much, right? And then if you're saying that the way that we can progress forward with your group of people is if you behave a certain way, or if you act a certain way, if you fit this mold of what we think is acceptably gay or acceptably queer or acceptably brown. And it's back down to this idea that like, it's much easier to kind of put these intersectional barriers up, right? People love rehashing this notion that like Asian Americans somehow hate Black folks, and it's like, I don't understand that story, because I don't have the freedoms that I do without those people. There's no T, there's no LGB without the T, right? I think we come back to this early and often. We don't get to be as free as ourselves without trans women, without Black trans women, without people who were willing to sacrifice literally everything to that point. And so that's something to remember. And it's like, it's not just us being stuck in this idea that like we have dues to pay or whatever. It's that the dues that we have to pay look so much more extravagant because of the weight of that kind of necessity for us to live, right? In order for us to just survive, like I need to pay $1,000 more just so that I can get my foot in the door. And that's just me getting my foot in the door. That's not any sort of accolade or being a mediocre white dude who fails up. Like that doesn't exist in our culture, right? Failing up doesn't exist in queerness. I think especially in our spheres and especially in food, I think it's really funny. Someone mentioned this earlier to me. It's like, how can you tell if a cucumber salad was made by a queer person? And I was like, you look at the house that it's in, first of all. Like, you listen to the music that's playing, you smell what's coming out of that kitchen. And it's like, that's how you know, because it's a complete picture. It's often a question about like, for wine, it's like, well, how can you discern terroir? And it's like, well, people have to make decisions first, and then we can kind of suss that out. I can't tell you what Black wine tastes like. I can't tell you what queer wine tastes like. I don't think that we'll ever get to that point. But what is important to me is that the community that wants to understand that gets energized by that conversation, because they too understand this notion that the tax that we're paying isn't just us paying it, it's the community that we're in that also has to double down on that.
I love this so much. I can do this all day. We're gonna go a few minutes over, folks. But I just want to mention that if anyone has any questions at this time, like please put in the Q&A just so we can make sure you have time to get through that. My final question is, I think as everyone is speaking, that we are clearly in a cultural shift, negative and positive, and more negative than positive, I'll just be frank. So do you think that, what does that mean for you folks, like in your spaces and in your workload? Do you think that that is going to impact you in different ways, and also to your audiences?
I will say, and probably because also I have a 7-month-old, I've never been more exhausted, but just systemically, wholeheartedly, completely exhausted, because it does seem like we take a couple steps forward and then get shoved back further in certain ways. But that said, I am in a position of commissioning work, and at my job, as an editor, I'm constantly making assignments, and so I have made a very clear commitment, and my staff has the same commitment, to be commissioning stories from all kinds of people, all types of people. And I work for Outside now, which is historically, we joke, by, for, and about white men. And it is, but that's not the future. That's not how this brand will not survive if that's what they do, if that's who their audience is, who they're commissioning work from. And that I'm also don't want to take away from the valid contributions of talented white men. I think that there are tons. And so I think that, but looking at stories for merit, for what the new story is, not just sort of like you're saying, failing up and like sort of, hey, this worked before, let's just give it another shot. Commissioning stories that are from people of diverse backgrounds, but diverse stories, and get at new things, I think is a way forward, because who knows, I am vehemently opposed to gradualism as a concept. However, being from New England, moving to Alabama, you just really learn a lot about people. And the power of storytelling is one of the greatest conduits of cultural communication, of getting people to understand who you are and where you're from. And I think that the better stories we can tell, and the more diverse stories we can tell, and put them in front of folks who might not have seen them otherwise, I actually have a lot of hope for that. And that's really my currently, and will be, I think, forever, my North Star in how to work.
I'll tell you a sales tactic that I use at the restaurant. I don't list any wine varieties on the menu. One of the first questions we ask is, how much do you trust me? And one of the other things that we kind of provide people is we force a hand without telling them that their hand is forced. So for example, a red wine category that we have is just all the categories of Merlot that you can think of. We don't tell anybody that it's Merlot. If they love Pinot Noir, we pour them a light style. We love Cabernet, we pour them a fuller style. You have something in between, I'll find you something that matches that story. In that same essence, it's not that I'm tricking you, is that I'm showing you that there's an alternate reality out there, this realm of possibility that you might not even have considered, just because you've had this notion of correct. I'm a person who loves to upend expectations. I like questioning framework. I like asking this idea that if it feels right, who does it feel right for? Because does it feel right for you? Does it feel right for your community? Does it feel right for your circle? Does it feel right for the decisions that align with you? And all of these other things that we consider, access, diversity, equity, inclusion, those things are great and wonderful, but nothing happens if we don't have action, urgency, and motivation behind them. And the biggest thing for that, and the reason why community work, I think, is so interestingly engaging, is that yes, exhaustion is a thing, and self-preservation and self-care are real things. And I think clearly being queer has recentered that, very much so, and especially COVID. But one of the most interesting things about community work for me, and especially for something that seems so big a question, is that it never feels like I'm tired after talking. It never feels like I'm tired after doing something for that. It never feels like I'm tired after engaging in the right way. I mean, Mayor Francis, we talked about this at the Wine Writers Symposium, is that this work never feels like it's work, right? It always feels like it's from the heart. It always feels like that the fire kind of just gets stoked a little bit. It maybe looks a little different, But at the end of the day is that if I get to commune with the people that, again, have chosen to unconditionally love this thing, whether or not it's in my center or outside of in my community center, that means that I get to do it again. I get to do it again and again and again, and I get to live the truest version of myself in this way. And I think that that's the most important thing about this, is that yes, it's tiring. Yes, it sucks. And yes, all these people around us don't want us around here. But you know what? The people that I surround myself with do. The people that I'm talking to in this panel love the fact that I'm talking to these people in this panel, and I get that same energy back. And there's a really interesting question here where it's, again, priority is not exclusion, but my priority is my people. And if you fit under this umbrella where I can say, you should listen to Michael. He's talking about really interesting things about, I mean, clearly intersectionality in food or rice. Mary Frances is going to talk about being outside, especially as a queer woman, and how we experience nature as queer folks, which is, I think, already clearly different. That's a panel in its own thing. But especially how we consider food and how we nourish each other. Those are huge questions for us because, again, it comes back to this idea of survival. And survival throughout whatever kind of thing that you get to throw at us. Food is important, shelter is important, but love is important. And this is a group that understands what that means.
Let the church say amen. What did the Lady Chablis used to say? 2 tears in the bucket. It really is a situation where I'm just like, keep calm, tights on, and keep pushing forward, because the bottom line is that our visibility kills them. Even more so, it kills the fear. It kills the mystery. The reason why we have these silly conversations about drag performances, you can tell these people have never been to one. My husband is a teacher, and he says, if being gay made him a master propagandist and groomer, I think every teacher would be grooming kids to wear deodorant, for God's sakes, or brings pencils to class, or do their homework. I mean, there'd be a lot of things in line before any of that other nonsense. And I've often joked, I've said, well, you know how much work it takes to do drag. Once you tell a kid you got to do all this work to do drag, they'll be like, I don't care for that. Nope, I ain't doing none of that. That's too much work. But the other part of it goes like this. We are the best fantasy. We do things. I mean, I'm just thinking about this. Between the three of us, where would we have been 200 years ago? What life would we have had to live?
None.
None. Or lives where this part of us, this big part of us, would have been completely erased. We wouldn't be doing, wait a minute, your ancestors like, wait a minute, you're literate? You can read and write? Wait a minute, you don't need a man to, you're how? Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, you know what? I'm literally sitting here playing with something. You don't know what I've been doing the whole time. You know what I have around me at all times? This is not a joke. This is not to be fun. It's not even being funny. It's being real, because I grow things and I'm part of the land. This is raw cotton. I grew myself. And I remind myself all the time, my daddy, my grandfather, his father, his father, his father, I can give you every name going back 250 years. And they were enslaved to make somebody else rich. And so we have obligations, we have legacies, but we also have just daily lives to live, and the privilege of just taking joy in what we do. in wine, in food, in beverage, and drink, in growing things, in matters of health. We take joy in this, in preparation, technique, in hospitality, in sharing with one another. And even that, to be clear-minded and clear-eyed about that, and do that for its own sake, as opposed to the waste product of the rest of it, is just a privilege and a beautiful thing. And I as we close the conversation, I just wish that we could just keep doing that. I think we're pretty safe-ish where we are. I'm not going to jinx us, but I'm also going to say that without us, the world doesn't dance. Without us, the world doesn't feast. Without us, the world doesn't have oral pleasure. Without us, the world doesn't dream. It doesn't fantasize. It doesn't go put its cares away for a couple of hours in a movie theater or on Broadway. Without us, the world doesn't fight. The world doesn't get the benefit of the brawls that took place so they could vote, so they could play a sport, so they could do whatever they wanted to do. And as long as we remind them that it's not about who y'all trying to hate, it's who you're forgetting who you love. That's what matters. And so, bon appetit.
Literally. I just want to thank you guys so much for this awesome conversation. I think I would want it to end personally. Like, I feel like I could sit and listen to you guys talk forever and it just keep going. You know what I mean? Like, the thoughts. But I just wanted to offer a moment of closing remarks. Anything you guys want to say to your personal audiences, to your friends. This is side note, this is going to be put on the JBF Public Library for people to come back to over and over again, because these conversations will not stop. This topic will probably not end up not being a topic 5 years from now. We will still be talking about these things, or hopefully we will be able to use it as a marker to see where we have come from. Is there anything that any of you want to put out on your heart to share at the end?
Say gay, say gay, say gay, say gay, say gay, say it, say it, say it, say it, get loud. One of my easy talking points for people is that, advocacy looks like this. You talk shit, you get loud, you get angry, you do more. This community is very easy to get angry, especially if you poke the bear around. And it's like all the things that we do really is, again, just so that we can make sure that our existence can continue. It is as simple as that. And if we're talking about coming out as many times as we need to, in order for people to kind of understand what kind of a burden that is, and what kind of a bizarre social expectation that is, that's one thing, right? And then to compound it with food, restaurants, hospitality, beverage, in a world that already is just trying to figure out how to kind of move when the earth is in crisis. Look to the people who really want to celebrate that kind of culture and tradition the most. And it's the people who look like us. It's the people who sound like us. It's the people who cook food like us. It's the people who share and celebrate like us. It's the people who gather with us. And that in itself is a really powerful thing, right? If we're going to say gay like this. Bring your friend over, have a kiki. Tell everybody to make potato salad the way that they want to make potato salad, and we'll have a race to see who, just have a vote off to see who gets all the votes. This is as queer as we can make it. This is as queer as we can make it. Is that if we just tell people that our favorite looks like this, the thing that makes me love food is this thing, the thing that makes me cherish my friends is this moment, that's gay. That's so gay. And I think that's what's really important, is that it's also as everyday as we can think about it. We can take certain moments in our lives where we can just say, you know what, I'm at peace, I'm very happy, I'm very comfortable. And you got to think about that. Well, because I don't have to worry about anything, right? Because I'm sitting in an Adirondack chair behind a deep lake in the middle of Finger Lakes, no one around me. I'm a big gay, who doesn't understand why no one else can be here with me. And it's all I want is just like, you know what, pull up another chair, because that's gay too. My world is gay. That's the only way that I understand how to move through this space. And if I need to say it again and again and again so that somebody understands it, you know what? Here it is. Here's what gay looks like. It looks just like yours, only mine's a little bit more colorful and a little bit more vibrant because I choose to see it that way.
I think all I can add to that is thank you, because Miguel and Michael, you're so right in saying that, like, the energy, I feel like when people get together, queer people get together, the energy that comes from that is like a nuclear plant. It's sort of, you can't even understand why now there's so much energy in the atmosphere around these people and the joy that comes from that. And, you know, when we're in binary places, it can be easy to sort of feel bogged down or feel tired or lose that energy. And I am so grateful for platforms like this and spaces like this to reclaim that energy and create new energy with queer people. So thank you.
Gay means happy, right?
It should be. Quick thank you to JBF creating this space and our incredible host. We really appreciate you and these great questions. And yeah, nothing I can really add to this, but just thank you. You know, a couple years ago, I was at the Roger Smith Cookbook Conference, and someone who I respect and know said, you know, people don't know what to do with you. You're a lot of things. You're too much. And all I could think was, if I don't make the most of this opportunity and keep the door open for other people, we'll never learn how to become Americans. You know, being an American at its best is the ideals that were created and have been pushed, not the situation. I don't believe in exceptionalism or jingoism, but I do believe that this is one of the few places in the world where I'm possible. And it's because people fought for that. It's because of an Audre Lorde. It's because of a Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. It's because of a Harvey Milk and many others. You know, it just never fails to astound me. Good and bad, problematic or not, so many people, everyday people, came together to make the reality we live possible. And it's our responsibility to keep that going. And I know we're all in the future is in good hands with us and many more people. And that also includes these powerful queer food union activists I met at the Leadership Awards. Just like who are making, you know, it's that wage, it's that survival, it's that overcoming, it's that you will respect me, you know, that everyday people are doing to make this better for all of us. And so we salute them. And I just want to say thank you guys. This was a beautiful surprise. And I am going to listen, just like my theme for Juneteenth this year was stay Black and alive. My theme this year is going to be stay queer and proud. So there it is.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining on behalf of Queer Food Foundation and JBF. And of course, thank you to our sponsors, Bento Box. But this is very filling, you know, this is why, you know, QFF exists, you know, to be a part of these conversations and to continue having an elevation for our spaces. But please check all of these amazing panelists out, support their work. They are here for a reason and they will keep doing their work for a reason. And of course, we have a lot of resources available at Queer Food Foundation as well, including these conversations. We'll be continuously doing these bi-monthly with other folks. Our next one will be about queer media, aka like influencers and vloggers. So more conversations coming to you folks. And of course, the previous conversations are on the JBF virtual library. But just thank you guys so much for this. I feel very full, you know, and I just want to like literally just have you guys at a table for like hours, just wherever you guys are, just pull you in. But thank you for being a part of this and sharing your world and your vulnerability. I really, truly appreciate your time.
Thanks,
you.
Vanessa.
Thank you. But that's everything, guys. Thank you for attending. And we will talk to you soon. Happy Juneteenth.